And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everyone, it's Ryan Metzler here, and today we're going to be taking a look at what is perhaps one of the most anticipated games of Gen Con 2012. We're going to take a look at Netrunner, more specifically Android Netrunner by Fantasy Flight Games. Now I say Android Netrunner because this is a reprint or reimagination of an old CCG by Richard Garfield, originally owned by Wizards of the Coast, I think. It's a two-player card game in which one player plays an evil corporation which is kind of hoarding resources, and the other player plays a runner, which is a sort of hacker who's trying to break into the corporation and steal those assets, or they call them agendas in this game, from the corporation in order to score points. So it's going to be a little bit of an asynchronous play style. The game plays pretty quickly. It's an LCG format now, so when you buy one box, you get everything that's out for the game. But real quick, before I get into too much about the game, let's just go ahead and take a look inside that box. We'll look at how the game plays, and then we'll come back here and get my final opinions on it. Here you can see the contents of the game of Android Netrunner. What we're looking at here is basically a bunch of cards and some tokens. Along the top here, I've outlined the runner cards. There are several different decks of cards that you can build with this, pre-constructed decks that they will basically tell you how to put together, and there are 3 different runners, each with a different play style. I'm not going to cover all of them because I'm just going to cover the basic mechanics of the game in this video, but note that there is some variability. So there's 3 different runners and some neutral cards that get mixed into those to help flesh out the deck. There are 4 different corporation factions. There are going to be different corporation decks that you can mix with the corporation neutral cards in order to make different decks. In addition to that, each character is going to have their own little sheet here that tells you how many actions they get. So the runner gets 4 actions each turn, or clicks as they call them, and the corporation is going to get 3 clicks per turn, kind of limiting how much they can do. In addition, you're going to have several different sets of tokens. You're going to have virus tokens and other tokens that can be used for different things. You're going to have credits, and you're going to have advancement tokens on the opposite side of the credits. Credits being the money system, and advancement tokens being a methodology towards furthering the corporation's victory condition. You'll have 5 credit tokens. And then you're going to have tags on bad publicity and the brain damage markers, which are bad for the runner. So I'm going to quickly mix together 2 of these decks. We will take a look at how the game plays, and then we'll go and get back together, and I'll tell you what I think about it. Here you can see the setup for the corporation side. Now we're playing the Jinteki Corporation, which is kind of based on doing damage to your opponent when they steal stuff from you, which is their whole objective. The way we've got this set up, we have our deck, which is called our Research and Development. We have this card here, the Jinteki Identity card, which represents our hand, which is called Headquarters, and then we have a discard pile, which is called the Archive. Now, in addition to that, we have several different things here. So these 3 are always in the game. Off to the side here, we have what are called remote servers, where you can install different things in the game. And what you're trying to install are going to be agendas, which look like this. We can see here this is an agenda. It marks that it's worth 2 victory points. And it says at the top you have to advance it, quote, 4 times in order to score it. And it says place 1 agenda here when you score it. So when you do finish scoring it, after you place 4 on it, you can put a token on it, and you can use that counter at any time to end the opponent's run. I'll get into what running means, but you don't want them running against you. So you're going to have those down there, and this is called an advancement token, which you can place here on your turn for a cost. In addition to that, you can put other things in your remote servers, and that's things like assets, which are kind of decoys for your opponent sometimes, and other times they're good for you. But basically, this one, you can put tokens on it like it's an agenda, and if your opponent accesses it, they're going to take damage for having accessed this, dependent on how many counters are on it. In the top left-hand corner of cards, you can see a cost. This one is 0, but for other cards, there will be a cost on them, and that is the cost to play them out in credits. You're going to get credits throughout the game, and playing cards to the table will cost credits. But as the corporation, you're often going to be playing cards face down, so it's not when you play them to the table that they cost something, but when you res them, meaning flipping them over. Now, in order to protect all of your assets from your opponent, you're going to be using what's called ice. And ice are these cards that I've played out sideways here, and what they are is basically software programs, or representative of software programs, which are going to block your opponent from getting through if they don't have the right counter for it. So for example, let's take a look at this one. It's played face down because your opponent doesn't get to know what it is, and you haven't paid for it yet. But ice have a cost in the top left. It costs 8 money to play this card to the table. In addition, this is an ice of 5 strength, which will matter when your opponent tries to break it. And then when you look at this, each ice has different subroutines. You can see in the top here, this one says do 2 net damage. And then underneath it, in a different one, it says end the run. Ending the run is bad for your opponent, and net damage is also bad as it forces them to discard cards from their hand. If they ever have to discard down below 0, they lose. But essentially, these cards have subroutines which your opponent will be able to break with cards called icebreakers, if their icebreaker is strong enough. Anything that ends the run will immediately stop them from accessing your stuff. Anything else, they can simply take the the consequences if they don't break it. So if they chose not to break the first subroutine, they'd take 2 damage and discard 2 cards, but they'd probably want to break the second one, not end the run. When they start a run against one of these areas, you can choose to res these, meaning to flip them over if you pay the cost. If they try and access your deck, and they succeed by getting through all of your preventative measures, they're going to take one of these cards and look at it. If it happens to be an agenda, which this one is, they're going to score it immediately, and this would earn them 2 points. If they access your HQ, they are going to take a card from your hand, and it's the same thing. If it's an agenda, they can score it, and other cards actually have a cost on them, like this one here, that says that they can destroy it if they pay that much money. If they access from your archives, they get to look at every card in there, scoring any agendas, and trashing anything they'd like to trash. Accessing the remote servers, meaning they get past all of your ice, or if in this example you have no ice, they get to look at all of the cards you have set up there. And if there's any agendas, they take them. So for example, this one, they would take and score, but if they were to access this unprotected one, they would find an asset, and that asset is the one that does damage, and that would be bad for them. Other cards placed behind your servers like this are going to be called upgrades. So you can see this one here is an upgrade, and it says that if you pay 1, you can flip this over, and any of your ice in this area costs 2 less to res, so it helps you get cards up to protect your stuff. Now, as I said, on the turn, you're going to get to do several different things, and the corporation has different actions they can take. They always get to draw a card at the front of their, or at the start of their turn, but then they can use one of their actions to draw a card, 1 to gain a money, 1 to install an agenda, asset, upgrade, or piece of ice, 1 to play an operation, which is basically an event card that does something. For example, some of them let you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. 1 to place one of these advancement tokens on their face-down cards. They can use 3 to get rid of all virus counters, which I will not cover in this review. They can use 2 to trash 1 resource if the runner is tagged, which is another thing I won't cover, but basically it's a way to prevent your opponent from getting more stuff. They can do all this stuff on their turn using up to 3 actions, and then it will be the runner's turn to try and come back at the corporation. The runner has a much less confusing layout for their side of the board. They don't have any of the servers or anything set up like I showed you. They simply have 3 different rows of types of cards that they can use. They have their identity card, their deck, and then their click tracker. So basically the runner is going to be trying to attack the servers I showed you earlier to find those agenda cards, be they in the player's hand or in the deck or in the remote servers that I showed you. And they're going to do so using different utilities that they have. So the main type that they're going to use are called icebreakers. They look like this here. They have a cost to play them to the table, and all of the runner's cards are played face up. This one costs 5. Next to that, they also have a memory amount that you require. You start the game with 4 memory, but you can get more memory by playing different cards out to the table. In addition, they have a list of different things you can do with them, and they are laid out by actions that you can take. So, for example, this one here says you can pay 1 credit to break any piece of ice subroutine. The subroutines are the different effects I showed you on those ice cards earlier. However, you'll also note that this card has a level of 0. So I showed you a level 5 ice earlier. This one can't break that. But if we look at Crypsis, it says the second effect here, you can pay 1 money to increase the strength of Crypsis, and you can do this as many times as you want. So basically, for 5 money, I can make this level 5, and then for 1 money, I can break the subroutine on the ice that I showed you earlier. In addition, this one says that as an action, you can place a virus token on Crypsis, because if you don't have a virus token on Crypsis, when you use it, the card will get destroyed after you use it. Now, most ice has a specific type it can break. It could be code gate or various other types of ice that would match the types of ice you can see here. But this one is a generic that can be used for all of them. So just note that there are specific types of icebreakers for specific types of ice. In addition to those, you're going to have a row for hardware. This one is a console. It would cost 3 money to play to the table and gives you 2 more memory. And then it also says whenever you install a virus program, you can place a virus counter on that program. Limit 1 console per player. So you can't have multiple different types of console indicated by the console keyword. The third type of card that the runner will have out is called a resource. This one is a resource job. And it says when you play this out for the 1 money, you put 12 money on top of the card. You can then spend your clicks to remove money from this card, 2 money at a time. So it's going to be a big bank that you can draw from on your turn if you need more money. Now, as I said, the objective of the running player is to try and make runs on the opponent to steal their agenda cards. And they're going to do so by taking actions. So the runner does not get to draw a card every turn. That is one of the disadvantages of being the runner. You must use your actions to draw cards or you will never get any. So your first action is you can use it to draw a card. Second, you can use it to gain money. Third, you can install a program, a piece of hardware, or a resource like I just showed you. Fourth, you can play an event, which are basically your instant cards. You can use 1 action and 2 money to remove a tag, which are bad for you and will allow your opponent to destroy cards. And then the final action, you can use an action to make a run. And runs are going to be the core part of this game. So here you can see the setups for 2 players juxtaposed like they would be in a real game, with the corporation here and the runner here. And let's say we're at the last action of the runner's turn and they'd like to make a run. What they would do is choose to make a run, and they would pick any of the servers, either remote or the central servers, being the headquarters, the R&D, or the archives, to run at. Now, let's say that they think that this one here is probably a trap. It's not protected by any ice, so it's likely that it's not an agenda, because that would be silly of the corporation player to leave it open. So they assume that this one here is probably an agenda and worth some points. So they'd like to make a run here, and they declare so. They're always going to run at the outside in, and so there could be multiple pieces of ice in one row, for example like this, to prevent a player from getting through to a very important card. But in this case, let's say there's just the 1 piece of ice. They encounter the first piece of ice, the closest one to them. And at this point, the corporation player has the choice of rezzing this piece of ice if they'd like to pay the amount of credits and they think it would help. So in this case, it would cost them 4 money to rezz this piece of ice. Let's say that they do so. They pay their 4 money to the bank, and the piece of ice is rezzed, and now must be encountered by the running player. So, we can see that this piece of ice is of strength 3, and has 1 subroutine, which is do 3 net damage. So net damage is the same as any other type of damage except for brain damage, and net damage will force our player to discard cards. If it were brain damage, not only would they have to discard cards, but they would have a smaller overall hand size. And if you ever have more brain damage than your hand size, you lose the game. But they rezz this, and it is now a 3 strength piece of ice in the way of our runner. Our runner only has 1 icebreaker installed, but it's a generic icebreaker and can break anything. But in order to do so, they're going to have to pump up the level from 0 to match the 3 on our piece of ice. So they would first have to pay 3 credits to the bank. They pay 3 back, or pay 3 and they get 2 back. And now this is a level 3 piece of icebreaker that can break any subroutine on any piece of ice. They then pay 1 more to activate the break a subroutine on a piece of ice ability, and they break the subroutine on this piece of ice. In doing so, they have bypassed all of the ice, and the player who is playing the corporation now has a chance to rezz any bonus cards that they have back here, maybe in their route, where they can install upgrades that will help them out. Otherwise, the running player is now going to access all of the cards in this server, and they would flip this over, and they would find out that it is indeed an agenda, and they would take this and they'd place it in their score pile, and they are now 2 points of the 7 points they need towards winning the game. If they had instead accessed this one, they would take damage, or if they had chosen not to break this subroutine, they would take damage as well. Since this ice does not stop the run, they can choose to take the damage, hurting their hand size, and still get the points scored, but they would be less 3 cards. And there you have it. That is Android Netrunner, the newest release from FFG at Gen Con, one that sold out very quickly. And it sold out very quickly with good reason. It's a good game. Now, the original Netrunner, which I played a little bit in its CCG format, was very difficult to learn from the rules, and I think that was my major down point with the original Netrunner, is learning from the rules was next to impossible. And Fantasy Flight, although they now have a 36-page long rulebook that is a little daunting, has fixed this whole issue by making it very clear in those rules how to play. As I said in the intro, the game is asynchronous, or not asynchronous, but asymmetrical. Sorry, I used the wrong word earlier. Asymmetrical in that each person has a different goal, but really you're just trying to score 7 points. One person by building up their points, and the other person by stealing them from that player. The game is very good. I like it a lot. As I said, very hard to learn, but once you get through one play, I think you really have it down, and for the future plays, you'll have a lot better understanding of what you're doing. The game is worth the hype it got at Gen Con. It should have sold out, and it did. I wouldn't currently go and pay the exorbitant market price that it's up for right now. I've seen copies up for over $100 on eBay. But if you have a chance to get your hands on this, maybe a few weeks or a month down the line, for the normal MSRP or even a reduced online retailer price, I would definitely suggest checking out Fantasy Flight's Android Netrunner.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.